Whoops, Josh just accidentally joined. Welcome to Legal Tech Week for October 14th, 2022. Sorry, I'm just booting somebody out of the and this is Bob Ambrogi, and this is the program in which we talk about the top stories in legal tech and innovation for the past week. And our panelists here today, as you see them, are let's start with Joe. Want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the podcast Thinking Like a Lawyer. I am not feeling my best, but that's the real lesson here is that this show must go on no matter how I feel. So we're going to push forward.
All right. And Stephanie, welcome back. Want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I can unmute myself also. I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I'm editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM.
And Niki Black.
My name is Niki Black, and I have a new title. So I'm going to...
You have a new title?
I do, because I actually advocated for this because my title was so ambiguous and literally like no one internally or externally could tell what I did from my title. So
So now you're a legal tech archduchess or something like that, right?
How did you know?
Okay, yeah.
It got out. It got leaked. No, but it's I also am celebrating my 10-year, and so sort of at the aligned with that, just as Josh was last time we were together. But so my new title is Senior Director of SME, meaning subject matter expertise and external education, partly because of some new programs I'm going to be spearheading that are sort of external facing. So that is my new title.
All right, the pressure
and
is now
on. That title is with my case. I think I may have neglected that. It's with my case, and I write
still the same job, just different title, or different job, same title, something.
Similar job, but with a little bit a little bit of external facing stuff going on. So it'll be cool. I'm gonna grow some programs. But anyway, I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above Law, Daily Record, and I write some reports on the My Case side too. So anyway, now to Caroline.
Now to Caroline, whose title probably is still the same since last time.
Yeah, so I have got the same title, Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider. Apologies for my very blurry, low light screen. I'm not in my office, but it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. And we'll be looking to Joshua Lennon to change his title any day now too. Great to hear from that. So this was a busy week, both in terms of things to write about, things to talk about, and in our own activities. Joe, Stephanie, and I, along with Steve Embry, who can't make it today, we're all at ClioCon this week. Niki was sort of there. She was there on the eve of it for the American Legal Technology Awards, but then slid out for the rest of the fun. And so we're going to be talking about all that and maybe a few other stories as well. But Caroline, I'm glad you're here because you wrote this week about the loss of somebody who was really kind of a pioneer of legal tech journalism. Somebody, I don't know if a lot of people on the call might even have ever met him. I met him only a few times physically at conferences here in the United States, but I'm talking about Charles Christian, who was the founder of the Orange Rag. I wonder if you could say a little bit about him.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a sort of devastating week, to be honest. Charles was a friend of mine as well, and but so yeah, he founded the Orange Rag in 1995, and he really was the original in terms of building. So talking about legal tech, so his first Orange Rag was in paper, and the reason it's called the Orange Rag is because he used to charge for it. And it was orange so that people couldn't photocopy it and share it without paying 49p or whatever it cost at the time. That's why we've got the name the Orange Rag. And I looked at the first copy that he wrote in 1995, and he was talking about this law firm, this company that was helping law firms if they wanted to have a presence on the internet, right? and it was this big thing, like, do you want to have a website? Which is just incredible when you think about in 95. So I just graduated from university, and my first job, I didn't have a computer. And he was very sort of a permanent fixture in those early days. He was really one of the only resources, and he was kind of the Orange Rag was the Bible. That so many people since he's passed away have come out on LinkedIn and said that he really was their source of everything, and he was kind of helped to form their careers. And so he really is. He retired. So I took over in 2014, and he'd had a health scare then, and he's had some lovely years since then working with horses and on his farm. And well, he's got some land, had some land, and he was very keen to retire from then, and really did retire from legal tech in 2016. But he's been doing weird science writing. He writes about Norfolk tales and weird fiction. So he's been writing quite prolifically ever since retiring from legal tech. But even though he retired in 2016 properly, I think he's still so missed. The comments on LinkedIn show that he's going to be so missed, and people are so grateful to him. So many people have come forward with all their stories about why they're grateful to him and how he helped them and what a funny person he was. So it's been a really sad week and a big loss.
Yeah, and his post-legal tech writing was really fascinating too, and I think you can still find some of it on Amazon. I haven't looked recently, but I know I've bought a couple of actually Kindle books of his from Amazon. So
if people are interested, The Urban Fantasist is his website, and you can still find links to books that he's written and the weird Norfolk tales and all. And he was just about to have a new book published, so hopefully that will still happen.
Yeah, well, sorry for that loss.
No, well, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. So probably the big event this week, and Niki and Caroline, this might bore you a little bit, except that I think there's possibly some general observations here about the state of conferences more broadly. I mean, Stephanie and Joe and I were at Clio. Sure, besides Joshua in the audience, I'm sure there's some others in the audience who might have been there as well. I wrote a post about it in which the title of it was that it was slightly off its A game, but still the best conference in legal tech. And I found it a really difficult post to write, in part because I've always been a consistent fan of this conference. I've always, since the very first one, thought it's one of the best, if not the best, legal tech conferences out there, if not legal conferences out there. And yet something this year just felt a little bit off. And again, if it had just been me feeling that, I'm not sure I would have even written what I wrote. But I just had so many conversations with people. They were all kept kind of saying the same thing, that something was different about the vibe, something was different about the conference this year. It just felt a little bit off. I just felt like I really couldn't write about it honestly without kind of pointing out that side of it as well as the good of it. And it's still probably the best conference in legal tech out there. And that was kind of the other funny thing in talking to people about it, is just about everyone who was saying it's a little bit off was also saying, but it's still the best conference. So weird kind of a thing. And it's so difficult to kind of separate the conference from the venue, because I really didn't like the venue, and I think a lot of people didn't like the venue too much. It was an odd kind of a place. I mean, in my write-up, I suggested it might have been designed by architects inspired by MC Escher and his sort of odd graphical drawings.
So that's interesting. I went a different one. My story is not up yet, but it will be in the next 20 minutes or so. But I said that it was designed by somebody trying to bring back Gozer the Gozerian. So like it's same logic.
Yeah. I've also heard Mall of America is another. I saw somebody else post on LinkedIn analogizing it to comparing it to the Mall of America.
Well, I was going to say, having come there straight from Vegas, it seemed like somebody thought Vegas casinos were too easy to navigate and wanted to make it more confusing.
Yeah.
Well, and I wasn't at the conference, but I was at that, the Gaylord Resort. And, you know, I would suggest that one of the challenges is as the conference grows, it's difficult to find venues that can support that
Absolutely.
large amount of growth. And so, and I think people tend to want to have it in different places. So you're not always stagnant in the same location either. There's only so many venues you can choose probably. So, and obviously I wasn't at the conference, but that venue did kind of suck. But I think that it's partly driven by the fact that the conference has grown and they have so many people. And plus, you know, you live and you learn. They've never held a conference there before, you know, so
Right.
I definitely found the venue was challenging, and I think that might be why. So it's almost like a good problem to have, I would suggest. And so,
Yeah, well, two things about. Go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, I can see the appeal because it's one of the biggest attractions in Nashville, and I myself had always been curious about it and wanted to see it without having actually gone to it, and then realizing, A, it's not really in Nashville, B, it's giant. So I mean, I get the appeal of it. It's very much a draw, but functionally, I think that was more where the problem is.
Yeah, just on that point of them getting too big. I mean, the last conference in San Diego in 2019 was the same number of in-person attendees, roughly about 2,000, and that venue did not have any of these problems. And you know, but again, as you say, live and let learn. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's necessarily Clio's. You can't blame Clio for the venue necessarily. Well, a little bit, I guess they picked it, but I mean, ILTA has been at that venue any number of times and will be returning to that venue, and apparently they like it, and it's probably worked for them, and they're an even bigger conference. So, you know, I don't know what to say about that, but
How many people do they have roughly at ClioCon?
2,000
Little over
live and
2,000.
1,000 online.
Yeah.
Wow.
3,000.
So they did go virtual as well this year. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they did virtual too.
that's also
They had a-
difficult too, to put on a conference virtual and in person, and to have the conference set up in a way that will facilitate that. So that might have complicated matters too. I mean,
Yeah.
they've always heard that they've done a great job. So, you know, I wonder if the venue contributed to a lot of that.
And they had a watch party in London too. So could have been with other people. Yeah, like I do think, I think the hotel is probably most of what made us feel a little off, which is something outside, you know, as you said, at most indirectly, Clio's issue. It's just difficult to have something in that kind of a place. And like Stephanie points out, that Vegas is the only other place with convention centers that large, kind of. Yeah, but Vegas is dedicated to the idea of you being able to funnel yourself to fun. This place seemed less interested in that beyond you doing your conventioning. So that, I think, was a large part of the problem.
Or water
Yeah.
sliding. Did
The
anyone take
Colin
advantage?
Lee, sorry.
Go ahead.
Colin says, I think conferences will feel more normal as they happen in person more frequently, and we need to regain our in-person humanness in some ways. I actually have to say, so I think, Colin, you were at Legal Geek. I was at Legal Geek, and I was also at Clock in London. And actually what's weird is that people feel conferenced out. Like, we've only done we've done ILTA, and then obviously you've done this one, I've done Legal Geek, and I get exhausted. We had to escape. I'm probably laughing. I had to escape to the bar rather than. but no, I mean, and I think I get exhausted much sooner than I would have done. That's one thing I've really noticed.
So it raises an interesting question because going back to the same venue next year for ClioCon, assuming they invite me back, so what do they do? I mean, is there a way to make it work in that venue? Obviously, it worked very well in that venue, but is there a way to make it venues? Is there a way to sort of better lay out the venue or the conference space or something else. I mean, I suggested a little bit, just, I thought, for instance, just perhaps one of the things that could be addressed is that sole registration area, which is like a big area that you had to kind of walk across to get to certain meetings and walk way back across the other way to get to other meetings. But they maybe could have made better use of that whole central space there, maybe somehow kind of made it feel a little tighter or something, or more compact, or had some other stuff there, but I'm not sure what else.
The problem I had more was not the conference space, it was the rest of it. So there were signs everywhere advertising ClioCon, but if I was ever outside of my little Delta part of that quarter of the hotel, I could not find my way back, or I could not, it took me 20 minutes to find where the bus was going to something, where my room to the conference was fine. And again, I don't think that's Clio's fault at all. It's just maybe with the signage, even just more arrows, or station a couple people for everyone who's completely lost. Because like this first night we were there, Joe, having been there for a few hours, was trying to give people directions because he was the only one who'd been there yet and knew anything.
And I was still awake that late at night, having nothing to do with anything else. I'm sure I'm sure it was insomnia, but I did happen to be in the lobby area, weirdly near that bar, and I was able to give directions to people. So,
yeah.
Were they the right directions though, Joe?
I did get actually pretty good at it by the end. Somebody, a person not related with the conference, actually asked me for directions at one point, and I said, "Hold on, here's what you got to do."
Yeah, I just put in the post. There was Jack did put a thread in Twitter addressing some of the issues we talked about, and one was just that sort of the logistical failures of that first night party, which the concert was probably great. I didn't go to it, but I think a lot of people that are not going it just because the lead into the concert was just kind of a fiasco, and people were hungry and thirsty, and waiting in long lines to try and get any food or drink in separate lines. So, but I think another thing is that I think something Jack said that I think is right is he wrote that on that feeling of something feeling off. He said a lot of people feel off right now. The world feels off. I'm thankful 3,000 people took 2 days out of their year to try to shake off that feeling and to celebrate innovation and connection, but there's a weight to it. I think that's a legitimate point, and I think we are still a little bit off.
I would also say one thing that's in my piece is I feel like there's also something to be said for, obviously getting bigger is a big deal. But I also thought maybe there's something kind of musing here and brainstorming. Maybe there's something to be said for just the whole concept of the conference has changed naturally in a way that was inevitably going to move towards it being not what we remember. If you go back 10 years and you gathered together a bunch of people, smalls and solos, embracing technology, you're dealing with a trailblazer set who need hand holding, but also want to celebrate that they have the courage to go out and do things, making it much more of a raw, intimate networking kind of an event. I don't think I don't think you can say that smalls and solos embracing technology in 2022 are trailblazers at this point. It's par for the course, which means that it just naturally isn't like, hey, we're the cool outsiders who decided to get technology into our lives. Like everybody's got it now. So just that shift changes a lot of the culture around it, right? Like when you're part of like this elite set of people who've decided to take the plunge, it's just going to feel different. I mean, I still think that ultimately the hotel is what I blame, but that might be part of it too, that the culture is just going to naturally change by its audience.
So it's not just the cool kids anymore. Everyone else has invaded the cool kids' lunch table.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously there is still help there. There's the downstairs where you can meet with Clio support people and they can walk you through any problems you're having and all that sort of stuff. But I also felt like a lot of that was less necessary than it had been in the past because you're dealing with a more mature set of folks, which I think was visible in the theming of the rest of the show being much more like technology was tangential. Like Jack's thing said that there were three prongs and technology was one, but it struck me that a lot of the stuff was not so much about technology, but about just general business of small law stuff that technology played a part in, but that was the discussion. And I think that speaks to like the clientele has changed. This is a group of people who use Clio for a purpose, not people who are excited about talking about how they use Clio.
See, I find this whole aspect of the discussion interesting, this having been my first ClioCon, that, I mean, all of the issues that I saw with making it hard to connect with people were logistical to me, where if you all felt that this one didn't feel rah-rah, I'm kind of confused what it used to look like, because you literally had people running and dancing, and there was line dancing, and there was everything. It felt very rah-rah compared to some other conferences I've gone to. So that's just a curious note to me.
Any conference with Jesse feels rah-rah. Like, I mean, we probably should also say, since we have complained so mightily about the treatment of the press at certain other conferences, we should probably take a moment to talk about how superbly professional is ClioCon's everything in dealing with the press. I thought, and you guys, I don't think you guys would disagree with me on that. I mean, from all of the pre-conference preparation to, you know, making sure that you have all of the materials and all of the bios and all of the information you're going to need about anybody you might be talking to then having the you know, I love that they have the podcast section set up at the conference as they did in San Diego. I didn't like the location quite as much as in San Diego, where it was right more adjacent to the exhibit hall, as I recall. But it was still a great location, and you know, and the Pamela and others who were there to help the press are just like, it's just so helpful with any kind of a question you have, and I mean, they really treat us as welcome members of the conference, not as some kind of alien invader or something.
Yeah.
Oh wait, so
Are there
so
any
you
mandatory meetings?
No
yeah,
6 a.m. mandatory meetings, no push-ups required or anything like
I
that.
was just gonna say, like, I missed the part where we went into a small dungeon room with no snacks or drink and got a press conference every morning. That's what I would look forward to at some conferences. So,
Yeah, none of that.
oh, did you notice also that you were allowed to eat food there? I know some other conferences don't do that, but we were allowed to have food, like humans.
Yeah.
Everyone
right.
was utterly delightful, I would have to say. And I, having joined late, Pamela is a godsend of a human being, and it was fantastic.
Yep. For sure.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, and Josh was saying we thought putting the podcast area next to the keynote room would give you maximum exposure to attendees. That could be true. I don't really have any problem with where it was. It worked out fine where it was. And it was, the nice thing about it was it was probably a little bit quieter than some of the other places we might have had it, and the ever accommodating Pamela was able to shut off the Muzak that was playing through the speakers when we were recording, which was also helpful. All right. Well, what else? Anything else you want to say about ClioCon before we move on to, maybe we should also talk a little bit about the American Legal Technology Associations, which was, I don't know, adjacent, piggybacked, whatever, on the ClioCon. Joe, I know you wrote a little bit about it. But...
Yeah, I wrote about the Alties, or whatever we call them. Do we have a name for them? The American Legal Technology Awards? All right, I'm going with Alties. We'll see if that sticks. Altas, okay, that might be the right answer. Anyway, so those of us who went to Clio plus Niki all attended those. Obviously, this is a relatively new award, but this is the first time we've really been able to do it in person as opposed to some kind of a virtual thing. So it was exciting to have like an awards gala to talk about innovation and to award some people who have been doing it in ways that really help people out. I chatted for a while with folks who were helping tenants be able to protect their rights. So there was one of the winners was an organization that helps you easily expunge a criminal record if you're legally eligible to do that. These are kind of important uses of technology that we all applaud here and there especially in our coverage, but it's one of those things. It's nice to be able to have an award and say you got an award. And so I think what Kat, Tom, and Patrick have done kind of by building this out is useful. And I'm glad that it's there. Thanks to all of you who were judges. I know some of you all have done that. Like Niki, you were a judge, right? Yeah. Okay. So it's very useful, and I'm glad that folks are out there doing this.
I thought it was nice that it was a separate entity. These awards were separate from anything else, because oftentimes awards like this are attached to a conference. And sometimes they get, they will get written about, but they kind of get lost in the shuffle a teeny bit. And granted, these were in a loose way attached to a conference, but they weren't actually part of the conference. So they really were their own event. And it was just a nice way for different people in the profession and in the industry that are innovating and taking steps to increase access to justice to get the attention and recognition that they deserve. So I thought it was wonderful. I enjoyed being on the panel, and I enjoyed actually having the opportunity to present one of the awards that I had been on the judge panel for. So that was nice as well.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And the only, it went off mostly without a hitch, except there was one presenter who just didn't get off the stage when they were supposed to. But the point is,
and forgot
there
to give
was
him
another
award,
person
too,
that did that too, but I won't name names, but it wasn't the only one.
But yeah.
Yeah, maybe sometimes I think I'm just getting to be grumpy old Bob, because I really like the awards. I'm really glad they did it. I like the concept of it and all of that. I felt like having it on the eve of Clio and attached to Clio sort of wasn't the right place for me, only because you get to Clio and you want to see people, you want to socialize, you want to start just kind of getting into Clio, and instead you then sit there for a 3-hour dinner, 2.5, I don't know. And it just wasn't the mood. It just wasn't kind of I felt like it was like the wrong mood for the kickoff of Clio, even though I understand it wasn't a formal Clio kickoff event, but
maybe
I would have liked to see it. Maybe they're like after Clio or something. And then I didn't want to get dressed up either.
Yeah.
I've been to too many rubber chicken things over the years that I don't look forward to anymore.
Yeah, I get that idea that it should be that you want to feel more standalone, but the problem is it's just we're already talking about how we don't like going to we're getting exhausted going to a couple of conferences a year. If you had another thing we had to travel to, it would be onerous. So I like that it's quasi piggybacking, I should say.
Yeah, it's true. And one of Dennis Kennedy mentions it. What is with this whole cloud thing? I'm kind of tired of that too.
They should put the award winners on the website for the American Legal Technology Awards. It's a simple point, but they haven't. So I think if anyone listens in, you should just put a little announcement of who won.
My post, which is in the chat, does have the winners. But yeah, I think they haven't gotten around to putting them on the official website, but they do have it because they sent it to me. So I know they have it.
Yeah, because if they stuck it up on the site, so it's easy for people to find, like me. When I was just looking at it while you were talking.
Just let me be clear. I'm a strong proponent of the awards. I was a so-called media sponsor, although I don't know what that really meant. But I think it's great to have awards like that recognize achievements in legal technology. It was just, to me, that moment, the timing of it was a little bit, for me, didn't quite work. But
and maybe the format just needs to be changed a little. It was their first in-person one, and that feedback, it's always like a learning experience, and that feedback maybe will. I think you've got to attach to a conference. I mean, you just do. You're not going to get the people there otherwise. And so maybe creating a format where there's the ability to interact more and it's less of a formal sit down. Maybe it's grazing, and people a buffet and grazing and the band playing most of the time rather than everyone wanting to go outside and talk, and the band got stuck in there playing their wonderful music and nobody was in there with them. So
yeah, they used to do
time
this
they
at Legal Week or Legal Tech in the old days. They would always have this sort of formal, dress up awards gala thing. And that just kind of fizzled out after a few years, and well, not after a few, it went on for many years, but at some point it just started to fizzle out because people just weren't as much into that kind of an event. But maybe if anybody here is a sponsor, they could talk to them and help redesign it next year. All right.
So what's the next story on Bob complains about something and then frantically walks it back?
Right,
that seems to be the theme so far.
Well, I feel bad, I don't like to always be, I don't want to be too negative about it, but it just wasn't my.
Are you suffering from seasonal affective disorder, Bob?
Maybe that's it.
Maybe you need some vitamin D.
I'd like to
just so you know,
therapy, but it's not like Joe's got COVID.
I don't.
Which Stephanie gave him, apparently.
Everyone's miserable.
I don't have it, nor did I give it to Joe. Don't start the rumors.
We don't. It turns out you can get sick doing, with other things, and apparently colds are one of them. Ugh.
I know. I had forgotten that was a thing too.
Did we even, let's see, Niki, I know you've got a story, and then Caroline, did you have anything other than Charles Christian?
I can talk about
what else do you want to talk about this week?
I can talk about the mass claims sort of story where we're moving more towards your model, but Niki can go first, that's fine, and then I can talk about that afterwards.
Well, I included this one because I get so excited when my Daily Record articles get picked up by one of the other Bridge Tower Media publishers and gets posted online where it's not behind a paywall. So this is one of the ones that was published somewhere else, but not behind a paywall. So I was super excited because people can actually read about it, because it's kind of hard to talk about things when no one can read it. So I always, because I'm from New York, I always like to track what's happening in New York, and what in New York always tends to be kind of cutting edge when it comes to ethics and that type of thing. And so I just thought that this was an interesting ethics decision by the New York Bar, and it addressed discovery demands for hard drives. And when that happens and a lawyer is faced with a discovery demand of that nature, and there's other confidential client information from different clients on the hard drive that are not involved in litigation, what the lawyer's obligations are in that situation in terms of protecting the confidentiality of other people who may not have waived the attorney-client privilege, but their information is nevertheless on the hard drive. And so I just thought that it was interesting, and they essentially said that you needed to get the consent of the clients that have not waived attorney-client privilege, and then you need to take a number of steps should they not consent to eliminate the impact of the disclosure of their information. And they list them in the opinion. There's a number of them, so I'm not going to go through all of them. But essentially, it's just, I'm always interested in the ethics opinions about technology, because that's partly what helps move the bar forward, is these issues being addressed, guidance being provided to lawyers, and then it makes it easier for them to innovate and take advantage of new technologies, knowing that what they're doing has been given the blessing, or at least they've got guidance in terms of how to move forward. And so this one I just thought was interesting because it addresses a common situation and provides some additional guidance that makes sure that lawyers preserve the client confidentiality. Nothing certainly groundbreaking, but I was just super excited that it wasn't behind the paywall. So there was that too.
So I'm surprised you didn't point this out, because I think this is a sort of a non-cloud ethics opinion, right? I mean, this is because this data was all on a single hard drive, and they had this issue of not being able to segregate the data from clients who aren't involved in the e-discovery matter from the client that is, or clients that are, I don't know if it's plural, but I was wondering, so I was reading it, trying to figure out if this data had all been in the cloud, would this even have been an issue?
That's a really interesting point. And I think it's a really relevant one. That is one of the benefits of the cloud, is that you can segregate data, you can address permissions, like who can access certain types of data. So you could, if your data was stored in the cloud, depending on the functionality of the software, you could isolate only that information that was specifically requested and only allow permission for certain people to access it. So I think that's a really good point. It shows the deficiencies and risks of using hard drives and premise-based storage systems versus the cloud. And I think that's a really good point. It would absolutely would have solved this issue, I think. So,
I think so.
one more reason why lawyers need to use the cloud.
Yeah.
Check.
And I think I agree with Joshua in the comment that it seemed like a really overly broad discovery request, but that, doesn't, I mean, yeah, I mean, they still have to, they're still going to have to probably provide, maybe it could have also been addressed through a meet and confer or something that could have narrowed the scope of it, but interesting. But at least the lawyers in Muskegon County are now well educated on this issue. Any other comments on that? All right, Caroline, what was your story?
When I said mass actions, I meant class actions. My brain's not working. So obviously in the UK, like in the US, class actions are huge. They haven't been even allowed. So the opt-out type model of class actions, which you are so familiar with, have not been a thing over here. But there was an act in 2015, the Consumer Rights Act, which kind of opened the door. Then there was a decision in the Supreme Court in 2020, which sort of really started to pave the way for these opt-out type claims. Anyway, this is a tech story, this is a product story. But so Shield Pay, which is the huge online payments company, which operates in the financial services industry and elsewhere, they've integrated with Case Pilots, which is a leading administration platform for class actions. And it's funny because with these product stories, so I don't specialize in this area, but I was thinking, gosh, this seems, I'm really interested in the growth. And I spoke to one of our leading litigation partners, one of the big UK firms, David Green. He's at Edwin Co. That he's one of the leading class action lawyers. And I said, in deciding, how interesting is it? And I said, could you give me a comment? And he went, marriage made in heaven. And I said, and he said, this is just another step in it paving the way, because obviously the payment of damage, the mechanism by which you pay these huge damages can be an issue. And so it's just another step. What's quite interesting about it, it's got bigger significance than just the fact that these two have integrated in terms of the move towards class actions becoming a real thing. So there's a class action against BT now. There's a class action, and there's multiple. I should I'm not on my desk, but I can share, if you want to get in touch with me, I can share the link to it. It's just on legaltechnology.com. It's Shield Pay and Case Pilots, if you want to have a look and see. So I had a quick look at where we are with a few of the other big class actions. And there's one against Apple, which is 768 million. And then there's this MasterCard one, which is sort of paved the way. So yeah, so it's quite interesting in terms of that movement, as it were. Is anyone in the chat?
We're
You're just chatting about Clio. You're still talking about Clio. That's what's happened.
I know. Let's talk about Clio. Any thoughts on that? Anybody want to say anything about that?
I appreciate it's quite UK centric.
Yeah.
It is interesting that the UK and the US have such different approaches to this. Like, don't worry, I'm sure in the US and depending on how elections go, we won't have class actions here either. So it's
yeah.
We don't even have a government. Don't worry about it.
And we're both struggling with monarch issues.
Well, right, because you don't have a king yet. Obviously, that's the most important part.
So one other thing, again, not to dwell overly on Clio, but not on the conference, but the other big news out of Clio this week was the legal trends report was released during ClioCon, and our one-time panelist Joshua Lennon is out there in the audience, who did a whole lot of work on pulling that together. Steffi, I know you covered this a little bit too. Is there anything that jumped out at you, or anything you want to point out about the legal trends report?
Well, I was actually going to, I guess it's kind of related, because it sort of ties into this concept that, clients want to meet virtually with their lawyers. But I was struck at the very beginning when Caroline was saying that in 1995, the very first Orange Rag was talking about how should lawyers have websites. And now in 2022, Clio still has to introduce a product to help lawyers get websites because so many of them don't have it. Like, it's a little bit dismaying and just like lack of progress in legal technology. I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I was surprised at the sort of the reaction to that, because I would have thought everybody's got a website, and yet you could even tell in the audience at ClioCon when they talked about that, there were people who were really glad to see that. So
yeah, I was shocked that, website seems basic to me, not even tools, website, that blew my mind. And so I just thought of that immediately when Caroline said that about 1995 in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. Well, okay. And then, so the other thing is, as I said, the legal trends report did come out. You can find it at Clio's website. It's clio.com/LTR, I believe. Is that right, Joshua?
I was about to do it, but I think somebody else has got it. Yep.
Yeah. All right. But again, I think the interesting thing about it was that it goes back to that kind of silver lining issue, in a sense, that firms are doing pretty well right now overall. Business is up, and matters are up, and billing and collections are up, and the theme of Jack's talk at in his keynote was this kind of idea of anti-fragility, this idea that there are certain kinds of organizations, or what analogy he was drawing was to law firms, that there are certain law firms that are just better positioned than others, not just better positioned, that in fact that can thrive in the face of stressors such as the pandemic or something like that. But it almost seems from the legal trends report that it even goes beyond even just those sort of anti-fragile law firms, that sort of across the board firms are doing pretty well, and it's not even fair to say they're rebounding, because in some cases these firms, at least the ones who were certainly already in the cloud and all that, kind of came out of the gate running, even when the pandemic hit early on, and it's have never really suffered all that much.
Well, and this was my piece on the opening keynote. Really did focus on that part, which is the opening keynote was a little weird, but it made sense for the audience, but it was a little weird because it was largely Jack introducing, hey, the legal trends report says everybody's doing great, actually. And Jack saying the economy is about to run into a brick wall. And Jack saying, and you all are going to be okay because you're already ahead of the game. And while those seem like contradictory thoughts, that is kind of how I felt coming out of it, that like, to the extent there will always be a need for legal help, to the extent that people are going to suffer in the legal industry under what's potentially about to happen, the people who've self-selected into this group are likely to be able to weather.
Yeah.
The other legal trends report thing that I noticed was, and that I wrote about, was that the legal trends report suggests that lawyers' hourly billing rates are below the growth in CPI, meaning that if you think CPI is not transitory, but is like long-term impact on inflation, lawyers should increase their rates. I do not think that another keynote speaker, Neil Katyal, who charges $2,450, we all know from that news story, he probably doesn't need to increase his rate, but most lawyers do. I mean, he can if he wants, but I don't think that's what the report was suggesting.
Right. Yeah, I think I mean we've seen now. I mean the to the extent that the Legal Trends report talked about these sort of anti-fragile law firms or resilient law firms. I mean that backs up what some other surveys have shown. The Wolters Kluwer Future Ready Lawyer report that's been coming out every year kind of finds the same thing, essentially that firms that are, tech forward or that in the cloud or have a good tech foundation are just better prepared for whatever it is that comes down the pike and are more likely to survive, not just survive it, but thrive in the face of it. So that's a good thing. The Legal Trends report does also sort of, validate the idea of the cloud. Not that any of us on this panel need any further evidence of that. And in some ways, it always seems funny that we're even still kind of talking about the benefits of the cloud. But I thought some of what was interesting about what was in the Legal Trends report was that it's not just that your firm is going to be more efficient or more profitable by using cloud software, but things like the fact that lawyers who use cloud-based practice management platforms were 44% more likely to have positive relationships with their colleagues, 44% more likely to want to work throughout the day rather than a traditional 9 to 5 schedule. That doesn't make sense. And 29% more likely to be happy in their professional life. So really cloud-based software even makes you happier and more collegial, I guess. So that's
how do you determine that? You just ask them, how would you identify your happiness on a scale of 1 to 10? Do you use the cloud, and then how happy are you? And if you don't use the cloud, how happy are you? I mean, how do you identify how happy they are, how they get along with their clients better? Is it just from their own observations? Like, how are you? That I'm kind of interested in. How do you survey that?
Well, I
Okay,
assume there's some.
Joshua said yes in the chat. Okay.
Joshua says basically. I mean, I assume you draw correlations across the data. I mean, if you're collecting data on who is or isn't using cloud-based practice management platforms, and then you're asking other data points about relationships with colleagues and how happy they are in their professional life, and connecting the dots.
This reminds me of that, and I'll get the exact details wrong, but where there's these perfect correlation between these data points in it, and they go, the same number of people who eat cheese die of getting tangled in their bed sheets. Have you seen that? Like, and it
Is that true?
Absolutely perfectly. And it goes, well, therefore there must be a correlation between eating cheese and dying by being tangled up in your bed sheets.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, maybe they're happier because if they use people that use technology tend to be, I don't know, optimists. I don't know. Maybe that's the correlation. So that one I think is interesting. I think there's tons of interesting conclusions from this report based on what y'all are saying, but that one in particular kind of jumped out at me as a little, suspect.
I think that stat in there about how lawyers not wanting to necessarily work a traditional 9 to 5 actually does make a lot of sense to me, because if you have the ability to, I need to take this 4 hours off, but work 2 hours later at night, you are going to be happier. It's more about that work-life balance, and it's about that control. So, I mean, that was sort of a factor that sort of got thrown in. I think people thought was a little bit weird, but to me, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
But my takeaway from the whole thing, because this is how my brain works, about the hours people like to work, is there was some group of lawyers willing to work every hour except 3 a.m. The only one. There were people willing to work at 2 and 4, but 3 a.m. is me time for all lawyers, is what.
That's because nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Isn't that the saying? They all know it, so they take an hour off just in case. I also wanted to say, I know it's really easy to piecemeal, like a survey like this and a report takes a ton of time to put together, and there's so many questions. And so it's super easy to like piecemeal what someone else has put together. So I don't mean to, that one conclusion just struck me as a little off. The rest of it sounds fantastic though, so.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing in that report that we haven't quite talked about yet, that is this whole work-life balance issue, or whatever you want to call it. But they found that basically equal numbers of lawyers cited salary increases and work-life balance as reasons for changing jobs. In other words, why would you change a job? 37% said salary increase, 37% said work-life balance. So that's as important. Work-life balance is as important as money, essentially, as a factor in why lawyers change jobs. I don't know. They don't know whether that's up or down because they haven't tracked that metric before. It's the first year they had that, but it'll be interesting to see how that tracks over time and whether work-life balance becomes even more important than money.
As a quick aside, I don't have anything more to add to this, but it is interesting that you mentioned that because that is in that report. And I also wrote a little bit about another report, the Axiom report about in-house counsel, that also found that in-house counsel now want to leave their jobs over work-life balance, which, I mean, maybe it's just me. When I was a lawyer, becoming an in-house counsel was work-life balance. I don't understand. Unless something really changed, if these people want to go back to law firms for work-life balance, then something's way wrong.
Maybe it's slightly more balanced, but not full balance.
Yeah, I think you'd be surprised at how many hours in-house counsel put in.
Yeah.
I was speaking to a head of innovation at one of the really big firms today, who was saying that this is something that we've all probably had conversations about, but with people working from home, I was sort of saying, oh yeah, tech creating efficiency so people don't have to work at 3 a.m. And he went, no. he said, no, really, we really are doing better. He said, because people who are working at home don't have that loyalty and that collegiality and that corporate culture that you have from being in the office together at 3 a.m. He said, and we've probably all talked about this quite a lot, but I don't know, I just kind of thought it was quite interesting with all these surveys coming out. He's saying they're really starting to feel it. We've talked about the Great Resignation, we've talked about all sorts of things, but the way he put it was quite interesting. You know, that they don't care as much because they're not there. And we've all done our stints, you know, in law and seen the kind of the hallways, you know, in the corporate practice when everybody's there at 3 a.m., maybe not 3 a.m., maybe 2 a.m. or 4 a.m., but like you're there and all together. But it was just interesting, whereas at home, you know, not going to be like playing football with yourself down the corridor.
Maybe it's harder to succumb to peer pressure over Zoom.
Yeah. I just want to announce for everybody else, what she means by football is soccer. That's fine.
Oh,
Go
yeah,
on.
sorry. Just my translator.
Yeah. Well, the last time I was up at 3 a.m. was Tuesday, I think. Thanks to Clio and Joe.
Yeah. Wait. I no. What's crazy is I want to be clear. I'd gone home at that point, I think, because I had a flight.
Oh, you may not remember being there.
This is an even better story.
I thought I left at about 2. Was my recollection.
I don't know.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think we were getting streetcar food.
Yeah, right. We got streetcar food at like 2 because I then did have a flight at like 8 a.m. So I had to hurry up.
Yeah. One other thing was just in that survey, 49% of lawyers expressed a preference to work from home. Is anybody surprised that that seems low to me? Don't all lawyers want to work from home, or I don't know. I know they don't all, but I would have thought it would be
partners and
Niki said this before. Niki has pointed out before that there's a class of partner who's like, I want to get away from all these people.
Meaning their family.
Right.
Yes, exactly, their family.
Right.
The office is their escape.
I didn't necessarily think of home as technically at home, more so as remote. But if it's at home, I understand that more.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
they're excited to work from Starbucks.
Yeah.
Or the beach in their vacation house. I don't know.
All right. Niki, you're working on a report too, right? When are you coming? Are you coming out with your report sometime soon? You're doing a trends report?
Well, there's 2 reports. The first is the 3-part benchmark series report, and we just released the 3rd part of that, and we're going to have a landing page with all 3 of them. Well, 3, not 5. And I will I've shared the first 2 with a lot of you. And then I'm also working on the 2nd annual legal industry survey. Probably will be published in December, and then I'm just because of the holidays, we may put up publicizing it and sharing it officially sharing it till January, just because it's going to get lost in the shuffle, I think. So yeah, that is, I am working on that one, and I'm actually just have one paragraph left in the conclusion of my final draft, and then I have to review it and get other people to look at it and get it formatted. And so we're getting there though. So stay tuned.
All right. All right. Well,
right.
we've overcome sore throats and jet lag and other such things to hobble through another hour of our show, and appreciate all of you doing that and being here. And we'll be back next week, at which point I'll find something else to complain about. Until then, I hope you all stay well, and hope Joe and Stephanie, I hope you both feel better.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great weekend, all.
And Caroline, you're sick too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. See you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.